Oh, thanks, Karen. Appreciate that. Just landed uh, bigger. Welcome, everybody. So, Megan, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
All right. So welcome back, everybody. This is a session. Whoa, what just happened? This is session 3 of our 6th session. So we still get 4 more conversations to have with you today. Getting started today, I wanted to welcome you back, which I did wholeheartedly welcome you here. 167 of you in the room right now. Hoping that number climbs up a little bit more, and or that people are watching the videos when they're not able to be here. A lot of people are doing that. I do want to apologize. I got kind of scattered about the Thursday, Friday webinar process. I sent you guys a link on Saturday, which is a little early, because I wanted you to have the recording, and I wanted to let you know that I wanted you to have the Google folder, because we did figure out that the Google folder problem was because we think that some people had links to specific documents and some people were going into the whole folder somehow. So I just wanted to make sure you guys had the link to the folder, because then allegedly everything in it you should be able to get access to. So because I had sent that out on Saturday, in my brain I thought I had sent out the Thursday follow-up email, but I kind of only did half of it. So I neglected to send out the survey. When I went to check the survey results yesterday, it said 0 responses. And I asked Megan if it's like I wasn't a collaborator on it or something, and she asked if I sent it out, and then I figured out I didn't send it out to you. So I really do value people's feedback about how they're experiencing the class, and I will really try not to do that again. And you'll see that today I'm going to ask a question that was on the survey so that we can check in about anything that you might need clarification about before we go forward. So that question's coming in just a minute. I do want to tell you that I rearranged the Google folder a little bit. So if you've been in there a lot, you might be confused by it. It just seemed confusing the way it was laid out. We can't put folders inside of the folder, apparently. So I just relabeled everything. So when you go in the Google folder now, you'll see like recording session 1, recording session 2, recording session 3, Q&A 1, Q&A 2, Q&A 3. So they'll be in there organized by item, not by session number. And I think so if you're looking for a recording, go to the R's. If you're looking for a self-reflection sheet, look for the S. All the additional PDFs that I'm finding from places that I think you all might be interested in, I'm putting under resource. If I refer to a handout, I'm calling it a handout. So you should be able to find your way around in that folder a little bit better. In there, you will notice something called a glossary. And both people from both classes have asked for a list of terms. I'm creating a whole lot of the content in this format in real time, and I haven't had enough time to really put the glossary together. So I put it in there. It's going to be a living, breathing document. You will see that there's words. I haven't even put the definition on some of the words yet. So just keep that in mind. It's a super draft thing, and there's only a couple things in there right now, but I do want you to know I am working on that, and that does matter. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to 2 folks. They're not actually on this call. They're actually in the Friday class, but Lindsay and Nikki both agreed to step up and volunteer to do some closed captioning. It is a very laborious, I'm not sure how you say that, process. To do the closed captioning takes a number of hours. I do know, that with that we can pay to have that done. I just don't have the budget right now to pay for that to be done. So I have asked for volunteers if you have time and would want a project. Lindsay said it was kind of like what did she say? A hobby for the common good. So she was feeling pretty good about that work. We're working out how to do that. So if you're interested in being assigned a video to closed caption, let me know, and I will put you on the team. In terms of our ability to chat, we just realized that when I was talking about people appreciating the authenticity that people share, that a lot of the comments I can see because it's being shared to panelists, but not everybody else can see because it's not shared to everyone. I do think there could be some value if people are saying something that they would be comfortable saying to the whole, now 202 of you, to go ahead and change it to everyone, and not just all panelists. If you prefer to just say it to Megan and I, that's also fine. It's just some of the comments that you're saying, which I actually repeat some of, not all of, they're really awesome. And they really show what people are learning and growing from. So that's just a choice, no pressure. I just wanted to say there's the three options. You could keep it all panelists, or you could do everyone with your name identified, or you could do everyone anonymously, we think. So try that out today. If you feel like you want to share a little bit bigger, feel free to do that. Here's the chat question. I'm going to open up my chat box so I can sort of see. Wait, this would have been in your survey. So just as you think of the first two sessions, just take a moment, just reflect on it. Is there something I've said or a skill or a concept that really needs clarifying for you? That it's just like, what? Wait, or I don't think so. So anything that you're confused about, or anything that you have a question about. Just gonna give it a moment in case someone's thinking about it. While you're thinking, there was still some questions around this idea of what awake mental rest is. And I often say we need rest. Rest is part of a resilient strategy. We cannot be sustainable over time without rest. Most of the time when people think about rest, they think sleep. And so when someone says, are you getting enough rest? People default to, are you sleeping enough? The importance of having psychological rest during your waking day is paramount. And we want to increase the number of moments that you're both awake and not processing actively. And Megan and I were having a great conversation about this earlier today. And we were talking about like the reset skills. I've called them reset skills, but we could also call them refresh skills. Like when you refresh the page of a website, it's like letting it get clear for a second, letting it get clear so that it can start new. And so I think of it a little bit like the rest, the awake mental rest is allowing your psychological palate to clear, and refreshing. So we were talking about Megan going for a walk, and I was like, make sure it's a receiving walk. I'd like you to have receiving walks where you're just out walking and you're just receiving what you're seeing and experiencing and feeling through your senses. You're just awake, and receiving is kind of like the stance for having awake mental rest. What we're trying to do is have you have more moments where you're giving your processor a break. We overprocess, overanalyze, overcompute, overcalculate. We overuse the processing mode of thinking. Okay, these are good questions. I got those two questions so far. So I wanted to talk about those two modes of thinking. Megan, just remember it's the emotional wellness check-in I want to talk to, and then the 3-breath reset in just a second. So the two modes of thinking, the idea that we have two different ways of thinking is really important. This first one is a receiving mode. And as I was saying in a webinar just a few minutes ago, that when little kids are laying on the ground looking up at the sky and just wondering and reflecting on what the clouds are and making it up using imagination, creativity, flow, that's like our receiving mode. And when we're little, when we're babies and we're little, we spend the higher percentage of time in receiving mode, which is why the learning curve is so high for kids. And then as we get into K through 12 and we start getting like second, third grade, they start teaching us critical thinking skills, which be clear, I'm glad I have them. Then they start teaching us how to use that brain, and then we start getting evaluated and graded on our ability to process, and then that muscle gets more developed, while the receiving and relaxing muscle sometimes just starts to get stagnant. And why that's important is when you're receiving, reflecting, open and clear, you're allowing a flow of new ideas, which is where ingenuity, insight, innovation, all in, it comes through us. And if we're not open, it's hard for that stuff to come through. The processing mode, which is very helpful, like if you give me a task, I need to use my processing brain to figure out the steps to do that task. It's analytical. It's sometimes referred to as computer mode. Move that now. And it's calculating, right? So what I want to just note is that, when you use your processing mode and you're in a clear state of mind, it's very helpful. That's when you feel like you might be really on target, and you might like do great problem solving. And that's like the processing mode being used in a relaxed state. If you're using your processing mode in mud mind, it's extremely problematic. It's not useful or effective. It's exhausting you and your system. And quite honestly, if you notice yourself in mud mind, that feeling of just being sped up and churned up like that jar, and you ask yourself right in that moment, like, am I receiving or processing? You're going to notice that there's a direct connection between being in mud mind and processing. And so noticing that and allowing our processors to rest. As I was talking earlier with a group of people, we pledge allegiance to the processor mode. We think that's what's going to save the day. That's what's going to help us figure out the problem. That's what's going to help get us to the other side. That's what's going to, like we stake our reputation on the brilliance of our processor. And yet what we know is that's not where some of the most incredible ideas happen from. So that's why we want to rest the processor every day, periodically throughout the day. It's just good processing management. And so I wanted to make sure we say that. So one of the ways to do that is that 3-breath reset. And somebody's question was, can you go through the 3-breath reset again? The first breath is just really noticing your breath coming in, noticing yourself holding it, noticing your exhale. The second breath, noticing your tension. Like I just noticed that my heart's racing. I can tell I'm excited, and I can notice just the energy in my body. So I want to just kind of gather that in. Sometimes I really just actually come up, gather up that energy on the in-breath, and then on the exhale, I just want to just relax. Sometimes it's just stretch. And then on that third breath, you want to use inhale, notice your breath. And then when you exhale, you want to use one of your senses to bring your attention to the present moment. Hopefully without analyzing the present moment. That would be processing. Just really receiving through your gift of sound or your smell. On campus, we went for a night walk again, like the amazingly different smells of the spring flowers. We stood and just took that in for a while. So you want to do that while letting yourself drop your energy. You actually want to invite yourself to relax into this moment where there's actually nothing to be all agitated about. And even if there is a problem, agitation doesn't actually help you solve the problem. So, okay, so this is a poll question for you. Megan's going to pull this poll up. I just want to know, which of the following reset skills have you practiced in the past week? Wait, there was another question. Well, I'll let you answer that. And check all that apply. Like if you're doing all of them, I just want to see kind of how many people are using which of these or none of these, as the case may be. So while you're answering that, I'll answer the other question that was in the chat that needed clarification, which is in the emotional wellness check-in, which is just me like checking in with myself and what's going on with, if you were here, I would make you say it out loud. What's going on with what? Your physical state. Like, am I hungry? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Am I having a medication reaction? Is there something going on in my physical condition that needs tending to? Your mood, am I in a low mood, steady mood, high mood, inspired mood? Your state of mind, am I, I'm going to try to do this. I was going to do this anyway. Is my state of mind like this, where there's like thoughts that are just coming through and there's space between the thoughts? Or does it feel more like this, where there's like big thoughts, like one after the other? Or does it start to feel like I'm starting to like get active with the thoughts? Or am I really engaged with a whole lot of activity around that? When you do the check-in, you don't need to judge where you're at. You just want to assess where you're at. And hopefully you're starting to see the value. Again, this is kind of receiving mode down here, where there's stuff can get in through the thoughts. You can hear people in, and you can have a thought and let it out. So it's kind of like somebody says something and I have an experience. It's like, that's an aha moment. That's what that looks like. And when I'm here, I'm more processing, more analytical, more, and sometimes that can't get in. It's like a ping pong ball, or ricochets back away, right? So hopefully when you notice, if you're here, and it's feeling really productive, okay, that's one thing. But if you're just going too fast and you're not like this is when like I've had the paper in my hand and I can't figure out what to do with the paper because I have too many ideas, popcorn brain, all at the same time. A lot of times that's one of the ways I talk about my state of mind is I have popcorn brain. So I just took a breath. I'm going to like let myself settle for a second and see then which one of these thoughts I might want to go with. That's a good reset. So I'm hoping that when you do the check-in, you'll see where you're at, and you'll invite yourself to fall back towards this way. And again, the way you do that is not to try to figure out the thoughts that are up here. And by the way, this whole spin is really just this one thought being held and processed and turned into like a thought tornado sometimes. So when you bring your attention away from what you're currently thinking, we're going to talk about that today, it can't go on without you. You are the one powering your thought experience right now. It's not the situation making it up. The situation's out there, and you're creating a thought experience of it, and you're pumping up that. It's sort of like if you were to drive by someone's house at Christmas time, and there's a big Santa Claus or a big Sparty balloon, whatever, and one day it's really big, and then the next day you come by and it's on the ground. Like, the balloon hasn't actually changed dimensions. What happened? Somebody pulled the power away from it, removed the air, and it had to deflate. Sometimes when I'm making up a really big thought story, and I see that, and I can see that I'm churned up and I'm not grounded and centered and at my best, bringing my attention to the present moment separates my attention from those thoughts. And as I give my attention to maybe a trusted friend's beautiful smile, and just really take that person in, and in that moment, then everything I was just making up settles. When I look back at the problem, I might see a whole brand new thing. But so wanting you to notice and be able to drop. So that the fourth thing that we would want you to be noticing, particularly when you're having a strong reaction to something, to say, do I have a rule activated from my rule book? So your rule book is your list, it's your beliefs, your beliefs and your rules, your ideas about how things should be or how things need to be in order to be okay. We have rules about all kinds of things. So you would say that they're really strongly held conditioned beliefs, like the way things should be. Like if you're having someone come see your house to possibly buy it, it should be show ready. And so my rules about what show ready looks like are clearly different than what other people's are. I figured that out after I sold my house and I went to other showings. The range of what show ready means to people is really different. But mine was my mom's version of that. So you have a rule book about everything. So when you're practicing the 3-breath reset and you notice yourself have a really strong, often self-critical reaction because you're screaming your rules at you, you're yelling at yourself because you violated some rule that maybe you made up or maybe culture made up, but maybe even if it's a great rule, usually maybe right now it needs to be suspended. So I'm just wanting you to start to notice the rigidity around those rules. And so the rule book is really your memory-based thought. Today we're going to call it your already thought, like thoughts that you've had that you hold on to as like the things you're going to believe. And so when you start to notice that you have a rule about something, if your witness self is starting to come online, your witness self can wonder, like, is that rule? Is that a good rule? Where'd that rule come from? Does that make sense? Is there any way for me to not freak out right now if I'm going to hang on to that rule as like the truth, like the gospel truth? What would people who don't have this rule do right now? And if this is generally a rule, is this a time where an exception might make sense? And so we judge ourselves super harshly based on those thoughts that we hold to be self-evident, that these are the things that have to be true. So I'm hoping that was clarifying that those two things, the 3-breath reset, rules are also like expectations for sure. They can be expectations that other people have of us that we have decided. The rule sometimes is I must follow the expectation that this person has of me, which can be a dangerous rule, even if it's your boss or your parent, because they're not always wise. And sometimes the things that they expect of us aren't doable. So whether they're an expectation for someone else that you write down, I took a whole lot of notes in my childhood. My dad would say, if it's low fat, it tastes like crap and I don't want it. I wrote down if it's healthy. That was troubling. My mom said, you can't trust yourself with food. Wrote it down. Like I'm gonna act like that's a truth. And so, gosh, if I can't trust myself with food, well, you know me, I can't trust myself with food. Like that'll affect a few years of your life if you don't notice that you have that rule. I had a thought, I hate tofu. Like the rule is tofu is bad. And I realized one day I had that rule and I've never even had tofu. And not only had I not had tofu, but I didn't go any place where tofu might be. And so it was that one thought, which I held like a rule, was really narrow, making my life more limited. So we have all kinds of rules that we have not held up and checked. Like one day I got really frustrated and I was about to yell at a kid. And when I asked myself that question, it was actually about frustrated that the kids didn't stack the measuring cups, right? Like I lost my ever-loving mind over measuring cups. And when I saw myself, I was like, I didn't even know I had a rule about that. And then I could see where I got that rule. And then here's another thing. Does your rule about that, do you want your rule about that to determine how you just present? First of all, even if it's your rule, do you have to be this uptight about your rule? Or maybe is it because you're in a low mood and you're hungry and you're feeling pressured with time and there's too much to do because you've overscheduled yourself again? And maybe it's not the measuring cups that are causing the issue or the kid, right? So if we don't understand that we have rules, which today's conversation should help more with, then we can't figure out how to navigate them. So I'm guessing that you have the poll results, Megan, since I spent too much time probably on that.
That's okay. We're here to learn. So yes, I was able to, I'm going to display those. So notice and settling mud mind is around 51% or 90 participants. We took about 80% of the people participated in the poll. 144 selected the 3-breath reset as one of their additional choices. What 5 things is only at 16. Emotional wellness check-in, 88. Using the 6-word framework, 22. And notice and release resistance or resentment, 84. So
good. Lots of people noticing. Lots of people noticing. That's so helpful because if you don't notice that you're resisting and resenting, you don't know to release it, right? If you don't notice that you're resisting that somebody does something a different way than you can't release it enough to even think if it's really important or not. So that's great. Okay, so
and that ties into one question, which I know we have to move on, but there is a question about releasing. So you talk about noticing that there's some additional questions about release, which I think leads into some of the other things that you're going to cover.
Yeah, it does a little bit. The short version, just to have you with us, it's like, are you willing to separate from the experience that you're having already? Which is why we don't want to like just release too quick, because sometimes we don't honor the emotions that way, and then they end up stockpiled and left over, and they become what we call a person's baggage. What we're wanting to do is process life so that we're not accumulating emotional baggage. So you want to acknowledge whatever it is and honor the emotions of it, however you do that. And then you do want to be willing to relinquish, I'm carrying the story. At some point, I have to be willing to let that story set aside. I was talking earlier today with somebody who was really concerned about something and wanted to know what to do about that situation, but they were in a state where it wasn't helpful. So releasing for them became kind of like the willingness to set that question aside. Kind of the visual we had was like on a kitchen shelf in the sunlight in a mason jar, that we want to have some new ideas. We want the light of day to like reflect on that. So I'm going to set it there, and I'm going to trust that I'll have some other ideas about it later. And right now bring my attention back to the present moment. So just to re-educate about the what 5 things, that would be a way for you to release your attachment to what you just were making up in your thought world, would be to bring your full beaming, delighted attention to 5 things you can smell or see, or if you're eating dinner, taste or the texture. 5 things you can touch, like this is the smoothness. Like you're just bringing your attention to something in the present moment, as opposed to still giving your attention and concern and energy to the thoughts you were making up. And we'll say a little bit more about that. So the release part is, if you see that you're resenting somebody for something, and you can see you're caught up in that moment of judgment, and even if there's something you need to do or say, or a boundary you need to set, you can't even get to that part of it until you're willing to like separate from the energy of it. I have to be willing to like, I think of it sometimes as like jettisoning my judgment, or I'm going to like, I say that because one of my favorite stories of my entire, almost 20-year career here at MSU was a manager who like was so good. I don't think I've told this story with this group. If I have, chat me and tell me, or tell Megan. This woman was so good at planning. Like, she was an excellent problem-solving planner. Institution is lucky to have her. She's still here. She's awesome. And she would take the scenarios and she would figure out a plan, and she's great at it. But once she had a plan, she would attach to the plan. And then if something happened and somebody did something that kind of messed with her plan, she would resist that the plan couldn't happen, or she would resent the person. So resistance and resentment to the loss of control, that the way she decided it should happen isn't going to happen. This is a hallmark of psychological rigidity. So she was actually hard to work for, because people would just get the resistance and the resentment and the upset about it. And so the coaching piece for her and I, where I said, I feel like I want to go down to Staples and get you one of those easy buttons. But yours wouldn't say easy. Yours would say plan ejector, because this is my question. If you're such a great planner, and it's what you're known for, your reputation preceded you to me. I've heard about your planning. If you're so good at that, why do you stay so attached to the first plan when it's clear that it's not going to happen, or that it got messed up? As opposed to being able to like hit that plan ejector and have that whole plan just jettison away, because that plan only existed in her experience, in her thoughts about what should happen, which by the way had a lot of rules to it. And so when she got so that she could notice herself in her frustration and her upset, when she'd kind of come up and out of herself and about to go off on somebody, she started to be able to witness that. And in that moment, she needed to jettison that and release it. And so that so that she could relax back into her awesome planning energy, which, by the way, is processing. Why are you doing this? That's not good. This is going to happen and that's going to happen. Versus back to receiving, which is like, okay, what do I want to do with this? So she just needed to separate from the original idea in order to make space for a new idea to come through, which is why resistance and resentment, noticing and dropping them are so great, because I can tell you that even if I feel justified resenting somebody or resisting that something happened because it's technically a sucky scenario and nobody would want it, again, I'm going to acknowledge I'm having a technically sucky situation happen here, and get to a place where then now it's about, what am I going to do about it? What do I want to bring to it? What's my value-guided behavior? Resistance and resentment, prevent the entire 6-word framework from happening. When you notice that you're resisting and resenting, that is one of the times where you want to go, okay, what is happening? Okay, it is what it is. Okay, this is happening. Okay, this is how I'm feeling about it. Okay, I'm going to let go of everything I've been making up about it. I'm going to release and relax back into my health and well-being, and then get curious about what I want to do next. So that's what the noticing and releasing. And the 5 things is just one strategy for helping that release happen, because instead of still thinking about the upset, you're now asking your left brain, and there's actually the science behind this, is your left brain has to take in the details of, I see a tray full of Sharpie markers. On my couch, there's my new half balance ball that's blue that I don't know how to use, right? Like, and so I forgot to be insecure about the question somebody asked me, because now my attention's somewhere else. It just resets your system. So, okay, I look forward to sitting with those numbers again a little bit more. The 3-breath reset, really, really something that people are trying on practically. I'd like to have you do that many times a day, where you're just, because we were trying to develop a mechanism, like a conditioning towards relaxing back, when culture has helped us condition towards upset. We want to meet that and greet that with an ability to cue ourselves back to physiologically quiet ourselves, which we'll be talking about in several different time frames. So thanks, Megan, for running that poll for me. Thanks, everybody, for participating in it. And here's the chat question. I'm just going to give this just a couple moments. For those of you that have been practicing those reset skills, what have you been noticing? I said last week I was going to give you points for noticing. I would say let's start with folks noticing when something wasn't going well, or when they weren't grounded. Like, what happened when you noticed that? I just noticed I didn't open my chat yet. Noticing when you need to notice. You notice your racing heart, short breaths, spinning thoughts. What else are you noticing? Like, did anybody notice themselves lose their temper? Did anybody noticing foggy brain? Did anybody notice themselves throwing something? I've done it. Noticed heightened anxiety and tension and ranting. Noticing yourself ranting to yourself is awesome, because if you don't even notice that you do the ranting, then how can you interrupt the ranting? And when I'm ranting, like a 14-year-old muttering under her breath and being pissed off at her parents, when I have that attitude and it's about, something going on, or a coworker or my partner or whoever, if I don't notice that I'm there, not a lot of good's going to come from that. Let's see. I notice I get angry quickly. Yes. So a lot of us do. And sometimes that's conditioned, and sometimes it's just fear-based, but we don't necessarily want to act out of anger all the time. So that's why the noticing is so important. Anger seems to be a theme. I should probably work on that. Notice heightened. By the way, anger is connected to grief. Anger is connected to anxiety. So there's a reason why we're feeling angry. And then some of us have anger habits. Some of us have judgment habits that make us angry about things all the time. So if we could start to interrupt that, so we don't have to have anger as much, and we can save anger for the truly righteous times, that it's helpful, that might be a good thing. Not aligned with your values. I'm wondering, Amy, like when you noticed that you weren't aligned with your values, like what did you do about it? If you're willing to say that, I'd be curious to hear. I've noticed that I'm able to reset faster. That's great. That's great. See, you noticed a low mood. See, Angela gets a point because she noticed a low mood. Curious, when you noticed you were in a low mood, I'm hoping that you took what you were creating in that low mood a little less seriously, because like that elevator we're talking about. Maybe I haven't talked about the elevator here yet. When we're in a low mood, we tend to get more problem focused, more tunnel vision. It speeds up. We tend to be more negative. We tend to be more hopeless. And when we're in a different mood, so if noticing in your low mood, for me, when I notice I'm in a low mood, I try not to take my thinking very seriously, because it usually leads to low mood feelings and low mood behavior. I do stuff in low moods that I would not do if I wasn't in a low mood. So if I don't notice I'm in a low mood, I can't adjust. Anger and ranting, less tension in my neck at the end of the day. That's a good thing to notice because of the breathing. Good. Breathing is good. Noticing you're not breathing is good, because then you have a choice to breathe. If you don't notice you're not breathing and your shoulders are up here, you don't know to relax. Notice I wanted to swear loudly. I hear you for sure on that. So did you swear loudly, or when you noticed you wanted to, was there an adjustment? I got tense and tight and started shutting down. Noticing yourself withdrawing, because, if you're withdrawing and you don't notice it, you have no choice. If you're withdrawing and you notice that you're withdrawing, you can kind of ask yourself, is withdrawing in my best interest right now, or am I just handing my power over to somebody? Or is withdrawing something I need to do right now, but I need to go out. I need to go outside and get centered so I can figure out what I want to do next. Noticing yourself withdrawing, to me, would be a good time. If you notice yourself withdrawing, I would want you then to hopefully pull out the card in your pocket that has the 6 words on it and just say, okay, what's going on for me? What's going on right now? Like, what do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to honor? Noticing that could help. I took some breath and was able to share with the other person what was needed. Good. So you noticed and you did something different than if you hadn't noticed. I noticed I found it easier to relax and reset when feeling anxious or overwhelmed at work. But I'm glad I realized I was going down a bad thought path and was getting angry. My breathing increased. I'm hoping that when you notice that, did you just quiet down and it was just done? Or did you get to center and then decide if you needed to say or do something constructive about that? We don't just want to have it be a releasing of the emotions, but we do want to be about that value-guided behavior. How long it takes me to release my resistance sometimes. Yeah. Well, a lot of us have like a very big resistance habit. We're doing it because we think that keeps us safe. But what we'll find out is there's better ways to keep us safe or safer. A lot of folks noticing the ranting. Yeah, when I notice myself muttering, it's just really helpful, because I'm probably going to come out sideways at somebody if I don't notice that. So it's also important to notice when you're relaxed and calm, or when you're grounded or centered, when your mind is clear, when you're in a steady space, because you want to notice that too, because that's when you should actually have the conversation with a partner or a kid or a coworker. Notice when you're in an anxious mind, stress building, you want to burst. Yeah, you can notice tension. You can notice intensity. And if a lot of people don't notice intensity, and when they feel intense, they feel inclined to act out, da-da-da-da-da-da, blah, right? Or they're intense and they act out and they end up in jail. Because we don't always as opposed to when I know when I notice that I feel really intense about something, I know I need to take a break. I know I need to get reflective and curious, because I need to assess whether the intensity is useful and helpful, which by all means then go for it, or if that intensity is actually going to cause me to derail. And by derail, I mean acting totally out of alignment with my values. So I notice I can be kind to myself and stop spinning. That's excellent. Good noticing. Well, we're going to try to help you notice that better in session 6. I noticed frustrations grow in a manner that usually leads to mud mine, and you caught it. It was awesome. Great. Anger. Yes, I noticed some voice volume. Excellent. Swear words. voice volumes, muttering. Like, they're like the dashboard indicator to tell you whether or not you're a safe human right now or not. And that doesn't mean I don't find really sometimes where some well-placed F-bombs or other kinds of language might be really something I need to do. That's not a bad thing. Anger's not a bad thing. When I express my anger in a reactive way, that usually doesn't serve me or anybody else very good. Yelling at the computer. So really, like, are you kidding me? All right, those are indicators. And I once almost wrecked a brand new printer because I was frustrated because I couldn't get the cartridge in. And when I noticed that I was frustrated and I wanted to beat the crap out of the new equipment, and also making up a story about what a piece of crap I bought, and then, making up all, I pulled back, I reset, and when I looked back at it, I realized that the printer cartridge needed to go like this, and it went in right away, right? Like, I could have hurt the machine. I know one guy was trying to install a stove in his kitchen, and he couldn't make it fit, and he got frustrated, and he didn't notice, and he beat the crap out of it with a sledgehammer. It was like a $700 moment, right? That's bad enough when it's a $700 stove, but what else do we damage when we don't notice? This is good. Okay, there's some good noticing happening. You want to notice, like noticing your temper and helping yourself settle. See this is going to fit to today, because if you notice your temper and you feel like you feel like the frustration and anger is caused by someone else, you're going to have every reason to want to like blast them. If you start to get that people are being who they are and you're the one creating your experience about it, which is where we're headed today, that changes everything, because blasting them isn't going to be value guided in that way. So, okay. Okay, good. Good noticing. I'm going to read all of this other noticing later. Right now I'm noticing time, and I notice we need to move on. We'll come back to that. So, okay. I'm just going to do a shorter version of this, Megan, than I planned. I don't know about you, but all that talk of noticing, all that energy kind of got me jazzed up. So I just want you to take a few moments, do a 3-breath reset, however that is for you. Just notice first one, your breath. Second breath, your tension. Feel free to pause in between those breaths. Let yourself drop a little bit. And then on that third breath, as you inhale and as you exhale, I'd just like you to again remember some moment when you were centered and at your best. Some moment of quiet, some moment of connection to your health and well-being. Feel free to just notice the candle flame. You're inviting yourself to relax right now. Maybe listening to the sound of my voice, seeing if you can hear the care and the love in my voice. I'm inviting you into this feeling state where we can learn some things together. Just taking a moment to hang out there. Making sure our external and internal environments are ready to receive. So we're just dropping into receiving. We can receive this candle flame. We can open up this memory of this centered moment. Last week I asked you this question. This is not a chat question right now, but I asked you to do the centered moment last week too. You guys chatted some great words about what you filled up with and what that state felt like, what the feeling state felt like, and then what you filled up with, what you have access to when you're centered. I'm trying to encourage you to lose your investment in this process and get better and better at dropping into this place where wisdom and creativity can serve you. So this is what you guys said last week. I caught most of the words. I realized I left the words solemn off, and I didn't mean to. Solemn is a great word. There's like a quiet steadiness about somberness. It's like I'm not busy. I'm somber, and you can be somber and open. Right. So these are words that you guys said when I asked you to think about that. I put them in here because I want you to think of this as your well of being. And I'm going to draw a picture that hopefully, like out of this energy state, which is actually who I am at core, outside. I know that because I've come to know that because there was an unhelpful text about the stock market I didn't need to see. When I'm idle, when I don't have anything on my mind, when I'm just doing something in the present moment, this is where I fall. I want you to get curious about that. Like, catch yourself with nothing on your mind, just hanging out, and then notice how you feel. Notice how you feel, and then notice what you have access to. There's like an energy flow, which is why I wrote source energy on the bottom of this picture. You are connected. If you see this as like a geyser or a spring, it's not just a well where water, it's a spring-fed well. And so you cannot deny your life energy from coming up into that well. It's yours. From birth to death, some say before and after, not sure, but my heartbeat, my respiration, I'm connected to this life energy right now, and nobody can take that from me. It's mine. And when I allow myself to look to that energy, I find myself in this more open place. When I listen to the words, they capture a certain feeling. There's another set of words where if we wanted to say like, when you're centered and at your best at work, maybe, or when you're centered, when you're involved or engaged in a situation or project. These are other words that are often used to describe that I feel like capture that part too. So I wanted to offer them. That when you allow yourself to come to the present moment, this is what you have available to you. Don't believe a word I say just because I say it. This is what I want you to be. When you notice that, when you're resisting and resenting something, your involvement in the thinking that is resisting and resenting, the judgment, the upset, sometimes the beliefs like you did that on purpose, or all the rules you have about yourself and other people create that. And while you're investing in that and creating that, you're not here. And I have come to learn that my ability to notice when I'm not here and my ability to come back here more quickly and more often allows me to just have so much more effectiveness with less wear and tear. Every minute that I'm stuck in resisting and resenting, and I'm just in my shoulder, like all of that, and then how I try to medicate that or numb that with stuff that's also not helpful to me, which if I wasn't like that, I maybe wouldn't need, right? Not that I don't still dig comfort food, and I need less of it because I'm less in need of comfort because I'm less caught up about all that. I still dig some macaroni and cheese for sure. So we're wanting you to be able to drop back into this state of mind. That's what we're releasing. When we're willing to release our attachment to what we already created, it's what we get to relax back into, which then reflecting in this energy state, reflecting on what you want to do about it. I'm going to try to, between now and next week, to come up with a variety of reflective questions, some of which might be like, what are my values related to this parenting? And if I wanted to act in alignment with those values, what would I do right now? That's a value-guided reflective question. It might be, what's the next best thing to do? It might be, what's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? It's coming to this place and then asking yourself, because the version of you that you are when you're here is very different than the version of you that you are when you're muttering to somebody. So we want to use that, which is why we want to acknowledge and honor the emotions and then release it so that we can kind of get to this place where a better outcome is going to come. So I wanted to just share very briefly, because I haven't yet with this class. I meant to the very first time and I skipped it. And so it could really be bothering some of you to not have this framework, because what's most important about this framework these are the collection of theories that I have put together that have become the MSU Health for You resilience training model. You can see them as the different theories, which is just telling you this is an evidence-based approach. These are very researched theories. The one that's least identified with like that kind of research is the three principles, which is a kind of a philosophical framework and understanding of how humans operate. This we're going to talk about in just a minute. A little less sort of more scientifically researched, but all the rest of them, including this larger theory about how dominant culture impacts people and its liberation psychology, its suppression theory. There's a lot of study in that one as well. You can see them all as like the theoretical underpinning that it's based on. You could also see those as learning targets, where over time I'd like you to learn a little bit in each of those areas. And we're going to work through some of them, not all of them, in this webinar that I'm making up in terms of the arbitrariness of 6 hour-and-a-half sessions on Zoom. But what I would want you to be really clear, given the conversation that we're about to have, is that if this were the model and this part wasn't included, we could be really dangerous. Because all of these pieces are really about how is Lisa the person navigating right now? How is the three principles? How is she creating her inside-out experience of life? Acceptance commitment theory, is she psychologically rigid and controlling and trying to avoid and control? Or is she more psychologically flexible, which just means that she's in the present moment, she's open, and she's doing what matters based on her values? Shame resilience am I shame triggered? There's a little bit of, is somebody else shame triggering me, and is culture shame triggering me, which would be actually part of the bigger circle. But it's still about how am I experiencing shame and how am I navigating my personal experience and my relationships with people. Mindfulness is really about a practice of quieting your mind and bringing your attention to the present moment in a particular way so that it can clear. Mindful self-compassion is really about the way in which you treat yourself. And we're going to spend some time in session 6 hoping to help you get better at being a high-quality helper to yourself. I shouldn't be the only high-quality helper for you. You should be a high-quality helper for yourself, too. If we just stopped there, it's all about the person and the interpersonal. And it can really harm people because that'd be sometimes, sometimes people are like, stress reduction, you should take a bubble bath. And to a person of color who's dealing with the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus, if I came up and said, you should take a bubble bath, they'd be like, shove your bubble bath up, like they'd have a really legitimate concern. We have to understand how a person's impacted, when it's you, you have to understand how you are impacted either as a person in a targeted group, not afforded privilege, and when you're marginalized, because that's got an impact on your emotional state and the way you're navigating. It's also important for us to notice when we're in that privileged group, when we're in the non-target group, when we're the ones that have the advantages, there's also cost to that. And sometimes participating in dominant culture in a way that gives you those advantages can also cause you to lose your soul in a way. There are ways, for example, that men who participate in the gender coding for men are harmed by that, either because maybe they don't ask for time off to go to a doctor, and I mean that's just like the billboards are kind of trying to get to people. Hey, you guys stuck in traffic, you might be pre-diabetic, and so living up to the gender code of not needing help sometimes puts people at risk. Another way I would say that this outer circle is so critical that we understand, especially as helpers, how systems of power and privilege are impacting people on our campus and in Michigan and in the country and in the world, is because we might misdiagnose. So sometimes people will present like they're depressed, but when you really listen to what's happening for them, they're actually oppressed, and they're struggling, and the stress and the way they're stuck in it is partly what they're dealing with. That there's research that would indicate that an African American woman who's my same age might on biomedical markers appear 7 years older than I am from a health status, because she has different challenges navigating the world than I do. That my privilege makes things easier enough that difference would be measurable. And so we just need to pay attention to that. And so that's why it's included in the practice, and that's why I really feel like also helping people navigate across differences requires resilience, which is why I really want this conversation embedded into the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we're doing on this campus. If you want to know more about my thoughts about that, you could go watch last week's Friday the 24th, the Spartan Fireside, which you can get to by visiting the website remote.msu.edu and looking for Spartan Fireside. There's a really important conversation to have about our culture becoming a more empathic, caring, healthy place to work. And the emotional resilience pieces have to be integrated, in my opinion, with our work to improve our relationships and make it a safer campus across differences. So, Megan, I was supposed to be done with this at 4:10. It's 4:27. We'll see how we do. Today, we're going to focus on this 3 principles and keep it in the context of the larger culture as well. And you'll see the reason why I really want to make sure that, because today's main point that we're going to build on next week, so we won't get to all of it today. So it's a major paradigm shift. It like rocked my world, because prior to the moment when I got this piece of information, I had it framed that my experience was being caused by people, places, and situations at me. I had an outside-in frame of reference. He's pushing my buttons. She's driving me crazy. They're on my last nerve. I felt like my circumstances were controlling me. And so I was stuck because I felt like there wasn't anything I could do about some of those, particularly when I was in a disadvantaged group. I felt like there wasn't anything I could do about that situation. This is why it's the rub. Like, yes, there's disadvantages, and it's not the same playing field for all of us, for sure. And this shifting from outside in to inside out has dramatically improved my ability to navigate situations where I am marginalized. So before, as a lesbian identified person, it felt like homophobia and all of the rules and laws and structures on the systemic and institutional level, it was just causing me to have this very narrow life. Could even cause me to have such a narrow life that I lived in a closet. And thinking that I was only okay if the people outside approved of me gave that a lot of power. I was afraid to be myself because I didn't know how to navigate if somebody rejected me. And so I stayed in a kind of a hidden sort of framework. Once I learned how I really actually operate, there was a shift. Like, instead of my worthiness in my mind coming from you to me, I started to see that my sense of worth and my connection to my innate health and well-being didn't come from you to me. It came up and through me. And my connection, my ability to connect with that allowed me to navigate homophobia differently, is how I would say that. And it also allowed me to be brave. The song Brave, Sarah Bareilles comes to mind. Let my words come out. Even though I didn't know what was going to happen, which is vulnerability, this really uncomfortable feeling you get whenever there's risk, emotional exposure, and the unknown. And so instead of it coming, being willing to trust that I would find a way to navigate if I did have rejection happen, allowed me to be less afraid of it, allowed me to come out of the closet, allowed me to do a whole lot of really cool, amazing things at less wear and tear. So this idea that it's one of the things we aren't taught that's a game changer when you start to see it, that we're using our emotional guidance system incorrectly because we don't know what the basic principles of it are. So here's this, I would say 100% of the time, whether you're awake or sleeping, you are creating your personal experience of reality. Right? You're making it up. You are crafting your experience. So we have external circumstances to contend with. Right now, we have the title of this essential skills for navigating difficult times. We have difficult circumstances, daunting for some. We are all in the same boat, but we are not all in the same storm. That's one of my favorite internet things that I've seen. We have circumstances to contend with. Yours are different than mine. Mine are different than the next person's, but we all have circumstances. And we have circumstances all the time. Like this one 23-year-old came in my office one day and she was like, yeah, I'm just really stressed out. I'm graduating and I'm looking for my first teaching job and I'm getting married and my wedding shower is on Saturday and I'm making these centerpieces for the table. And but as soon as I get that all taken care of, I'll be fine. And I think I was a tired mom of really little kids. And this is what came out like, oh, wow. Are you going to have kids? Right? Because if I were to write down the things that I'm currently stressed about, the circumstances that I think are controlling me, and I was to write them on sticky notes and stick them up here, I'm pretty sure that as I get this webinar taken care of today, tomorrow there's another one. Like if I'm going to say that I'm only okay if there's nothing on my plate, anybody out there got nothing on their plate? I don't think so. And so, I needed to be able to be okay and navigate even when there are maybe some really big things like that my wife has been away from me for 6 weeks. Except for some weekend visitation. That sounded funny, but yes, she's somewhere else because my daughter came home, and to keep her safe, she's somewhere else. So that's a thing we're dealing with, right? It's not like I want to say I can't be grounded and steady until that's taken care of because I don't even know how long that's going to be, right? It's already longer than I want it to be. I could resist and resent that for a whole lot because she's pretty tremendous, right? But I noticed and I do have moments where I'm like mad about it, right? And then I'm like, okay. But when I come back to center, I realize it's what we need to do for me to like be the mom I want to be and to also like help flatten the curve. And it's just, I keep her safe. And so I drop out of resistance back here. It's not that. I have a variety of experiences of that circumstances throughout any given day. And one of them might be like, oh, I'm really glad she's not here right now because I want to work out and it's 1:00 in the morning, which I probably wouldn't do if she was here. So there's sometimes that fact is like, there's like space and freedom in that. Here's the thing. We have circumstances, but you're also having external circumstances, but you're also having a personal experience of those circumstances 100% of the time. And while the circumstances might not change a lot in a given day, like when I was trying to sell my house and it took 2.5 years, my economic status didn't change a lot day to day. That was back in 2009. It didn't change a lot. Like the state of my retirement account didn't change. Well, it might have. If it changed today, probably not super great. But it's happening. And then some moments, like, because I just said that, I reminded myself, no, I'll relax. Some moments I have one experience of that. The next moment, another. What we want to make sure we're doing is choosing our reactions to those things from our wisdom rather than from an upset. So you have external circumstances, and I don't want to minimize any of the circumstances. As we open up, people in lower income jobs have a different choice to make than I do probably. Like they're going to have to choose losing unemployment and having no money or going to work. That is a different experience than I currently have. Some of the people in my family do. It's not right now, the choice, who knows? I don't know. But so those circumstances are different. But even for somebody who has to go do that, like the folks who work for RHS who have done tremendous job being in service to students as this time has unfolded, that's a reality that they maybe have to do. In one moment, they might be really afraid. In another moment, they might be pissed off. In another moment, they might be really proud. And your personal experience changes moment to moment according to what's going on for you. So we have external circumstances, and we're creating our personal reality of those circumstances right now. Right now. And when we start to think about what gifts we have, like how does that work? A lot of people have not had the conversation of really wondering, how is it that a person crafts their personal experience of a given moment? Like, what are the gifts we have that allow that to even happen? That's what the 3 principles really kind of talk about. that our personal reality of our circumstances is variable and changes moment to moment over time, which is why even though we call them stressors, we say, what stressors do you have? They say, well, I'm unemployed. That's a stressor. But what's interesting is like the word stressors like means to cause stress. And so even our cultural language says, though, like moving causes stress. But I know like lots of people who have a variety of realities around the idea of moving. I know when I'm moving, I have different realities of that over time. My son's graduating from the University of Michigan. 3 kids, none of them took me up on the tuition credit. So there's that. I might resist and resent that in some moments, but he's graduating and we're having an open house. And, in some moments I get all kinds of energy around the fact that he doesn't get to have an open house like his siblings did. And that this time took that from him. And then there's times where I'm like, I feel really good about what we are creating and the creativity about that and the love around it. And it's just totally beautiful, good enough, probably better than. And then there's moments where I'm resisting and resenting that I have an open house because I've got other pressure and, because I have an inside out frame, my value guided self decided to do this family celebration in this very unique way. And I want to notice my experience so that I don't get carried away in any of those that really aren't true. I really do want to wholeheartedly create a moment for him to the very best of my ability. So one person might have one experience, like the stay-at-home orders. We're all having different experiences moment to moment and different experience from our neighbor because one of us might be down at the Capitol protesting and one of us may be, wearing a shirt that says that woman from Michigan. I stand with that woman from Michigan. Like people create different experiences over time. So they're called separate realities. You can have a separate reality from the next person, but you can also have a separate reality than the one you just had 2 seconds ago or 2 minutes ago or half an hour ago or an hour ago when you were about to lose your ever-loving mind at your partner. And then you went outside and you took a reset and you went and just hung out with the daffodils that are still hanging out despite the rainstorm. And while you got quiet there, you kind of saw that maybe you jumped to a conclusion and maybe you need more data. And you might have a brand new experience of that same fight or argument. A friend of mine was really fighting with her husband, and then he went out to mow the lawn, and he was fighting back and forth. Like he was mowing, but he was like, rah, 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 and her experience shifted because she saw how funny that was. And then when he came back in, she's like, just so you know, I didn't have that fight with you. You had it by yourself. And then he woke up from it and they had kind of a funny thing about that. So you want to appreciate, celebrate that you could have a different experience of the same circumstance. When I'm having an experience of a circumstance that's really heavy, it helps me to know that my reality of that circumstance won't always be that way, including something that's not changeable, like the loss of my mom. And which is, never going to change back to she's here. But my experience is very varied, and some moments are very light about it. Some moments I have a lot of grief still about it. That's true for all of us. When I'm having a hard moment, it's helpful to know that it's not my forever. I'm just having a hard moment. I always say, comma, right now. What am I making up about this, comma, right now? And how might that look different later? So here's the way it works. This is the equation that the outside-in oriented people have. I used to be that, where like an external circumstance created my stress. Rarely did I have one circumstance, so I usually had a bunch of them, so I had really big stress. Or if I have those stressors and I see just the hard part about those, I might even have like chronic dissatisfaction, like just really be disgruntled or dissatisfied. How this is like if I populate it, if I have a big test and I think that test causes my anxiety, then every time I have a test, I have to have anxiety. There's no equation in there where I get to have a test and be relaxed and calm and bring my relaxed best effort to that. Because I have it framed in my mind that my stressor is a test and it causes anxiety. Performance anxiety, fear of public speaking. You think the public speaking you think it's the public speaking that causes it. And that any public speaking would make that happen. When I was outside in, I had this rule that 2 people was just a conversation, but 3 people was a group. So anytime I had to speak to 3 or more people, I would get so anxious about not doing it well enough that I would end up being sleepless. And now I'm stepping in front of, 213 people. And I slept great last night. So the public speaking doesn't create the angst. There's something that happens in our thought world in relationship to public speaking. What I figured out about that was, it was often that I wanted to do such a good job for people that I ended up over responsible, and then I got insecure, and it was my insecurity that was the problem, not the public speaking. So here you populate it further. If you have to go to the grocery store and there's Zoom challenges and there's lack of information and an increasing death toll, you might think all that has to make you stressed. If that's the case, we would all be stressed all the time to excess. But luckily, that's not how we operate, which is why sometimes you could be cracking up with a friend and having a lighthearted moment in the middle of, I remember a time where one of my former partners and their sisters got to giggling. They were giggling at their grandpa's funeral. They lost themselves in a moment. And then a few minutes later, they had grief. Like, it's variable, right? It changes. This is the equation. These circumstances are still here. Look, they vibrate. I'm trying not to minimize. That's the real, those are hard things. But really, to get to your personal experience over here in the gold box, you got to have those, those things happening, those responsibilities, those circumstances. But then look at the stuff in the red that should look like an emotional wellness check-in, right? Because I'm clever that way. So there's like the external circumstances, plus in the red here, my internal experience of it. And that's what gives me my reality. What's cool is like the stuff in the red can change, particularly with a reset, or, for physical state, like if I take a nap, it's going to look different. If my mood shifts, it's going to look different. If my state of mind clears, it might look different. If I let go of a rule or create a new rule, because not all rules are bad. Boundaries are a rule I have about a situation. So you get to have a more variable experience if you really pay attention to the internal part. So this is how it looks. People feel like those circumstances create their reality from outside in, but I want to try to draw for you in some of the time we have left here, this inside out quality. So here's the gifts that I have. I'm connected to a healthy energy flow, like we talked about. The folks I learned from call that mind. I will go over these 3 principles again next week. But for right now, you are connected to a source of new ideas that flow through you. The blue X's here represent just new ideas that could flow through that I have just throughout the day. We have 80,000 thoughts a day. Some of those are brand new, and a bunch of those are already thoughts. They're thoughts that you've had a lot. They're part of your thought story, and they're thought stores that you shop in. One of mine always is, how do they know that there's 80,000 thoughts? Who counts that? And then I get kind of all caught up in thought about that. But they say 80,000 thoughts a day. Out here you have serious things going on that need to be dealt with, and they change, and there's more than one of them sometimes. But your experience of that's going to be created like from this inside out. I'm just trying to show you how this goes. So there's those circumstances again. Change that. I guess I added that in the last session because that's a whole new thing. I didn't mean to give everybody, but now everybody had like a lot of thought. But like, yeah, that's a thing. And that's a thing every day. And then sometimes you're having some thoughts about it. If someone said last week they're a financial person, so like budget fiscal officer. So it's like you can be a fiscal officer during a time that a company is having financial strain and not be in angst 24/7. And I would guess you're probably already not. That it's variable. That there's some moments when you're not. So how can we use this understanding to help ourselves have less angst and more clarity as we go? So here are the gifts you have. You're connected to this healthy source of energy. Something's beating your heart, something's respirating. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Some folks with a religious framework call it one thing. Some folks with a scientific framework might call it another. Creativity, flow. If you're a Star Wars person, you call it the Force, right? Like there's a there's an energy and a vibrancy that flows through us, like we're like garden hoses connected to the faucet of life, the spigot of life, and life flows through us. I challenge the idea that my life is really a sum of my circumstances. Those are life circumstances, and circumstances can suck, but my life can't suck, because life is what flows through me. It's this incredible energy that flows through me that allows me to navigate those circumstances, which may or may not be pleasant, right now. The next thing we have is this sense of consciousness or sensory awareness that brings to life in like Technicolor, Dolby sound, like much better than all of those things. Like through your sensory system, your consciousness will allow, and like a light bulb in a movie projector, will allow any thought that goes in front of it to get illuminated into your personal reality. So my reality depends on the fact that I'm connected to this life energy in the first place. And I'm glad that's true, because I like living. And I have this consciousness, and then whatever thought I put in here is going to get brought into my experience. And that this process I'm describing for you right now is neutral. It's just called the thought cycle. We're connected to this flow, and we have this consciousness, and we have this parade of thoughts. Some of those thoughts are brand new thoughts, which would be the blue X's. And some of those might be helpful, and some of those I can have an unhelpful new thought, and I can have a really powerful new thought. And then in the already thought bucket, which is just your memory-based thought that you've had, that you maybe have had quite a few times, your self-concept is in there, your education is in there. Again, some of it's positive, some of it's not so positive. It's just thought that it's not brand new. And so my experience of those external circumstances out there is going to totally depend on which thought I fuse with. So let's say in a moment I fuse with an unhelpful thought of I'm bad with money. I'm bad with money, and I shouldn't have put all my money in the stock market like I did after my grandma passed. Maybe I should have done something else, and maybe. And just like, and if I hang into that thought, as soon as I have that thought, I'm going to have guilt or shame or a bad feeling of some kind around the fact that the thought is I didn't do it right. I did something wrong. And that's going to bring me a feeling, and that's going to swing out maybe into behavior. Maybe I'll change something. Maybe I'll do something different. I don't know. Maybe I'll go eat some cake-like products to like medicate the fact that I'm feeling those feelings. But it's like, there's the state of my finances, and my experience is actually caused by whatever thought I'm holding about it. If I was grabbing hold of this thought, which might be like, we're all in this together, everyone did the best they could and made their choices upon lots of consultation, and no one saw this coming. So if I have that thought, it's going to be a different experience than I had the other one. So whichever thought gets brought up, and that it's the thought you're thinking right now. It's like a slide in the slide projector. It starts to get illuminated. Immediately when you have that thought, it connects with your feeling state, and it starts to bring to life physiologically that experience. What tends to happen then is we start to have more thoughts about that thought, and doesn't that kind of look a little bit like this? But we start to have more thoughts about that thought, which gives us a really big feeling. And then that feeling often, particularly if we're not witnessing it, leads into some kind of behavior. We have a physiological feeling. Like if that thought is about, I think I'm going to get hit by a car, I physiologically am going to have a stress reaction. If that thought is, hey, I should get this group of people to go over and sing happy birthday to this other really cool person, and just like, wow, wouldn't that be fun if we were all like standing around the person's porch singing happy birthday and surprising her. When I have that thought, I have a totally different feeling, right? And so moment to moment to moment, by the way, out of nothing came a birthday celebration, because I had a thought and a feeling, and then I had the behavior of sharing it in an email, and then that actually became something that happened yesterday, and much fun was had. The process then, the behavior led to an outcome, which is there was actually a gathering, 6 feet and masked, and all kinds of silliness ensued. So this cycle is happening moment to moment to moment, and that's how I feel my experience. So if you don't know that you're creating any of it, you're just having that feeling, particularly the ones that are difficult feelings, and you're feeling it and you're like, oh, why am I feeling this? And then instead of like wondering like what thought you're holding that's bringing that to life, we're trained, we're conditioned to look out, to say, oh, I'm feeling this way because of that, because of this stay-at-home order, because of this economic situation, or because my kid didn't stack the measuring cups right? Like we look out, we attribute the source of our feeling to stuff outside of us. This is simple yet profound in terms of how you experience life. If you think that the external circumstances causing your feeling, then you feel justified to look for an external. If it's got an external cause, then why not get an external cure? That's a donut, my very first and favorite external cure, right? Because if I'm eating the donuts, it seems to medicate, which is that arc there, that feeling. I don't feel it so much anymore. Which then makes me have an already thought in my already thought bucket about the magical power of donuts, which then likely makes that thought of a donut come up more often, because now I have a thought habit about donuts. Whenever I have a thought about a donut, including like right now because I'm talking about it, I physiologically can experience what it would be like to eat my favorite donut. And then I might start having thoughts about getting a donut and wanting a donut, and that's going to create a physiological experience called a craving. And if I get stuck in that pattern, I actually think that it's the donut that changed. It's the outside in thing. It's the donut that changed my experience, and it might give me a sugar rush. It might change some things, but what really actually changed was, instead of having the thought of, oh my God, I can't take this anymore, I had a new thought of, oh, I want a donut. And then it was actually the shift of the thought. So now for me, what happens is, when I'm having a really tough emotion, and I don't look out first, I look in first, I get curious about what thoughts I'm having and how I'm bringing those to life and what's going on about that. I'm noticing that I'm having a judgmental thought and I'm resisting, or I'm noticing I'm having a hurt thought that comes from a really old pattern of feeling like, poor me, why me, nobody loves me. And maybe one of those old thoughts is activated and I'm like lathered up with that, and that's why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I might look in and have a different change process happen if I know the inside out nature. If instead of, let's see if I can get this, and I know we're getting close, Megan, I'm aware. Instead of, and I end up changing that. If I'm not witnessing, the witness self, this vantage point, we want you to be noticing what you're making up with your gifts. Instead of attributing these external circumstances are creating your reality, we want you to start to get curious, and not just curious like with like the neutral eye of a camera. You want to get curious about what thoughts you're having and how that's being brought to life, because that's what's creating your experience. If you don't see this part, you're going to be up here and you're just going to be operating from your reactive self, your habit self, your conditioned self. And you might do great things, like some of the perfectionism we have, some of our high achieving, overachieving, over-responsible stuff serves us well in some ways, but it also keeps us trapped. It's also addictive. We think we have to do that to be okay. When you start to witness, you actually get to start to see if this actually makes sense. And some of the already thought thoughts or the rules that you have are not helpful or necessary. They're not even true. Somebody else gave it to you because it served them maybe well. Or you just made it up wrong along the way. Like I used to have a thought that my dad didn't love me, therefore I'm not lovable. Neither of those things were actually true, but it sure ended up causing a lot of blockage of any new ideas about my dad or about me, because that was a thought I hung out with all the time. And because of that, there was no space. When we're really bucket identified and we have those thoughts very actively, which we're going to talk about next week, we can't have a different experience of ourselves or of public speaking. Or when my economic status during a breakup was happening, and in a moment when I was tired and my mood was low, and my state of mind busy, like at Kroger at 10:30 when I'm buying groceries and I have to charge my groceries, which include toilet paper, I would have this thought about, I shouldn't have to do this. I'm not getting enough money, get really resisting and resenting how much child support I'm having. I'm now having a really big reaction to that. If I could see that, and know the inside out nature, I can say, wow, you are just really attached to this right now. This is really hard right now. I don't have to judge myself. I'm just saying I'm really caught up. You notice this nice friendly clerk here. I'm gonna connect with her. I'm gonna remember. It's just how I'm making up right now. This is not new. I've navigated it for a while now. I'll navigate it some more. When I quieted down that day at the Kroger, then after that this cleared away, I had a brand new thought about something I could do that would generate more revenue. And right, wrong, good or bad, the process of noticing upset, dropping it, and having creativity is how I navigated making it through that, trying to sell that house and through that economic downturn and through getting 3 kids officially Saturday, 3 kids through their undergraduate college experience. Feeling like the circumstances work this way, I wouldn't have had that kind of adaptability to do that. So we're going to spend a lot more time next week trying to help you see this in a variety of metaphors. We want to make what's invisible visible to you so that you can start to notice yourself more. It's really important that you note, like if you notice that you have a thought that's not helpful, and even if you get that if you weren't having that thought, something better would happen, it is not helpful to see yourself have a thought and then have the next typically already thought be a judgmental one about how you shouldn't get caught up in thought, because now you're just caught up in a different judgmental thought that's blocking the flow. So you just want a gentle understanding of how this works. I have just a few minutes to take questions and answers. And so Megan, I don't know if you have one over there.
Can you remind me what the B and O stand for in your illustration?
Thank you, because I've meant to redo this so that I can write them. It's thought, feeling both the emotion and the physiological feeling, and that swings up into behavior. And when you make a behavior, it always has an outcome. It has outcome. Resilience in general is the definition. I think I shared it last week. That this is Viktor Frankl, who was in the concentration camp. Between the stimulus, circumstances, and the response is a space. And in that space is freedom and choice. And we only get the space if we understand the inside out part. Any other questions over there, Megan?
Not yet.
Questions now, because I'll answer them in writing.
Yep, if you have questions, please place them in the Q&A and we can address them. We might have time for maybe one more now, and then otherwise we can address them afterwards. I think you have a moment to leave us with your closing thought if you'd like.
Well, I'm going to just click a little bit because, me, if I have another minute and there's another slide, I might try to figure out what that is. We'll talk more about this, but what gets in your thought bucket comes from a variety of sources that, some of those sources are helpful. There are also sometimes sources that like we just wandered into the Belief Mart and people said, here, put this in your cart. And I didn't necessarily get a chance to sort of decide, do I really want to believe this or do I not? And it's not that some of the stuff in my already thought bucket I will go to my grave believing and holding to be true. I just appreciate that I've had a chance to kind of reflect on some of this. And it also explains why we have differences across difference. We have conflict sometimes across differences because my sources were different than your sources. So if you have a rule in your rule book that good people don't have biases, this picture should help you see how that's just not possible, because all of us had an empty thought bucket and stuff got put in it from our upbringing called socialization. And now I'm holding it to be my truth. But really it's not the truth. It's just the truth that I got. And so that's how implicit bias is just, I have a thought that I don't realize doesn't apply to everybody. And I don't even know I have it. And there's because people aren't witnessing themselves, there's all kinds of thoughts that people don't know that they're having. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how this understanding supports our ability to get curious about some of those differences and to move into wondering and maybe uploading or updating our understanding, and or helping somebody else do that in a way that can allow us to have more connection across differences. There's a lot of, okay, someone's out there snapping and nodding. I like the snapping. I'll do it for you. I get that. Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. And curious noticing, points for noticing and points for working the practice skills. There's 179 of you still out there, hopefully listening. Please help yourself practice that you're wanting to go from upset back to fresh, from created back to the source of creativity. We'll talk more about that.